To talk more about the military offensive, we're joined by Jessie Jane Duff, former U.S. Marine Corps gunnery sergeant. She's also a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. Jessie, glad you're with us.
Thank you.
Do we know anything more about this general from the East who's been trying to take Tripoli?
Well, essentially, he is probably one of the most brutal warlords out there. This man essentially put Muammar Gaddafi in power in 1969. He went on and fought in Chad. He was taken as a POW. Oh, I'm sorry. He had also participated in fighting against Israel in the Yom Kippur Wars in 1973. Went on and was fighting for Gaddafi in Chad. Then he tried to overthrow Gaddafi. He essentially was moved to the United States. This is a really freaky fact a lot of people may not know. He lived in Langley, Virginia for 20 years. He's actually a U.S. citizen of all things. Now he's back over there trying to utilize the very Gaddafi supporters and the regime people to gain power. And it's quite bizarre because he had actually tried to overthrow Gaddafi himself. So this is really a man who is fearless. He is a former POW himself. He has fought tooth and nail for some form of power since 1969. There's not too many folks like him that are left on the planet, let alone in Libya. And his essentially trying to convince the world that he's the only person that can unite everyone, participatingly tells me that he is, what is he, the lesser of two evils? I don't find that to be very convincing.
Yeah, sounds like it's the right thing to target him, but no question the situation is intensified, not only because of the airstrike that took out Tripoli's only airport, but because of those loyal militants fighting so fiercely that a UN-brokered ceasefire has failed.
Yes, and the American forces now are trying to decide if they should be withdrawn. The U.S. African Command, we need to ensure that our own people are not put in a position of being killed, because when you start having a second civil war since 2011, this is a second one. We're looking at people who are war-torn people and will fight to the bloody end. We've had nothing but problems in Libya ever since 2011, when we ourselves did not support the right side, which our Secretary of State Clinton had supported the very Muslim Brotherhood that has been trying to regain power ever since. We have been involved in this mess that has essentially created part of this mess. You know, Libya used to be a strong economy. You know, they were producing 1.8 million barrels of oil a day, and their goal was close to 3 million a day. Now we're looking at a country that has become disabled, and many of the refugees that are creating a crisis there in Europe itself. So this is a humanitarian crisis, a military crisis, and it looks like our hands are not clean because we have been right over there all along also. But Secretary Pompeo has denounced what the general has done, has essentially stated that it must stop, and the airstrikes upon the civilians must cease.
Well, so far, 25 killed, 80 wounded. What's the risk this could devolve into something more serious?
Well, it's an incredible risk, and that's where we should hope that maybe some of our special operators can support the UN-backed forces and ensure that this does not evolve into something worse than it already has. This is a man that has no concern for human life, obviously. He's only seeking his own power, and it's very hard for me to decide to trust that he would be the best person, because yes, we are talking about Muslim Brotherhood and Sharia law that has been tried to be forced upon the Libyan people, but they have denounced that. The Libyan people really are struggling to find their own voice, because you have these warlords that are fighting, and you have forces that do not always have the people's best interests at heart.
Right. Gunnery Sergeant Jessie Jane Duff, always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for being here.